It's all very quiet up here today at Haytor, but 200 years ago this quarry was a hive of activity. Granite was being cut here and transported to London for London Bridge. Later it was used to build the British Museum and the National Gallery. How was it transported out of here? Well, first of all, pack horses were used to take it down to the Stover Canal in the 1800s and 1810s. But that was very expensive and very difficult. So they came up with a new way, and in 1820 the Haytor Granite Tramway was opened. It was made of granite blocks between 3 and 8 feet long, around 15 inches wide and 12 inches deep. A flange was cut in each one of them, and it guided the wheels of a horse-drawn cart. 2 rows of blocks were placed side by side, 4 foot 3 inches apart. There were junctions like this one where carts would switch from one track to another. They used movable metal guides swinging on pegs placed in round holes to do this. There were no sleepers as the blocks were so heavy they simply stayed in place due to their mass. The tramway followed the contours of the hills in wide curves. It descended 1,300 feet in 7 miles from Haytor to the Stover Canal. The average gradient was 1 in 28. Granite mileposts can still be seen. This one tells us we're now 6 miles from the terminus at Ventford Basin. Around Haytor, the tramway is well preserved, but as we move downhill, it disappears to a large extent under gorse bushes. The trains that moved along here were 12 wagons long, carrying the granite and moving downhill by gravity. They were braked by a man with a wooden pole, which rubbed against the 2-foot diameter wheels. Horses pulled the empty carts back uphill again. As we move away from Haytor, we go into a wooded area which leads down into the Yarna Nature Reserve. Here the tramway runs gently downhill by a line of beech trees. Another granite milepost can be seen. We're now 5 miles from Ventford Basin. The tramway soon emerges from Yarna Woods and crosses lower down, and then the Haytor Road by the Edgemoor Hotel. It then passes into Colehayes Plantation, where we see milepost number 4. Soon after opening, the total track length had increased to 10 miles as more sidings were added to reach the increasing number of granite quarries. Southeast of Chapel Farm, the tramway crosses the Bovey Pottery Leat. The bridge remains, and it is now Grade 2 listed. It has rubble abutments supporting a piece of granite which is roughly dressed and about 1 metre above the leat. Upon the bridge and extending to either side is a section of the granite tramway which is well preserved. The tramway was built by George Templar, who owned the quarries and nearby Stover House. When it opened, local dignitaries gathered on Haytor for a party, and a flag flew from the summit. Ownership of the tramway passed from George, who built it, to his son James. But in 1829 he sold the tramway, Haytor Quarries and Stover House to the Duke of Somerset. As we approach Bovey Tracy, the tramway runs behind a row of houses and we pass the 3-mile marker. This is the last one to survive. At this point, the granite tracks disappear under housing and industrial units for a while. In Victorian times, it ran to the south of Pottery Road. And later emerged by the roundabout, which is now the start of the Bovey Tracy bypass. Here we can see a couple of tracks in the grass. The tramway closed in 1858, by which time cheaper sources of granite had been found. from here on for around 2 miles across Bovey Heath, the trackbed was later taken over by the Newton Abbot to Morton Hampstead branch line, which opened in 1866. It closed to passengers in 1959, but freight trains carrying oil and timber continued to use it as far as Heathfield until quite recently. A mile or so from Heathfield Station, we see the Granite Tramway again, this time at its terminus at Ventiford Basin. Here, granite was taken from the trains and loaded onto barges on the Stover Canal. There's an example of a granite tramway wagon at Ventiford Basin and another one, cared for by the National Trust, here at Park, just outside Bovey Tracy. Once the granite was unloaded from the trains at Ventiford Basin, it was carried by barges down the Stover Canal, which was built between 1790 and 1820. From this lock at Jetty Marsh, the barges went down the River Teign to Teignmouth, where the granite blocks were transferred to ocean-going vessels at the new quay, which had been built in 1821 specifically to handle stone used to build London Bridge. But our story has a strange postscript. As tourists started to flock to Haytor, a proposal appeared in 1905 to electrify the tramway. A power station was built near what is now the House of Marbles. It was to be fuelled by brown coal or lignite, which was mined locally. But the idea got no further than the drawing board, and the power station ended up producing electricity for the potteries, which made drain pipes and sanitary ware.